10 days away from the big showdown in Happy Valley. How the first 3 games have changed our outlook on what should be College Game Day. Oregon, Penn State, and a crossover edition. Let's go.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, it is that time for a crossover edition of Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, and Locked On Nittany Lions. He is Zach Seyko. Of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Shout out to our everydayers out there who are probably familiar with this tandem at this point. I don't know how many we've done in the offseason, Zach, because this is going to be an epically awesome game. We're going to get into matchups, how things have changed through the first 3 games so far, what to look forward to going into next week, why it should be game day, all in today's show, which is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. So, Seyko, Oregon through 3 games has been very impressive. Northwestern was actually their least impressive game of the season so far. A matchup on the road that they held a 34-0 lead before the starters came out of the game. So Penn State has not been as impressive, which isn't to say they haven't looked really good, but the FIU game alone, if you just wanted to compare them side by side, is cause enough for someone to say, hey, Oregon's been better through 3 games than Penn State has. Yeah, that's true. I do still look at this game mostly the same way. I'm trying to not get over my skis excited about Oregon because Penn State's going to be their first real measuring stick of the year. They're 34.5-point favorites according to FanDuel against Oregon State this week. Do you still view this game the same way that we've talked about it all offseason?
Unfortunately, no, not at all.
Really?
I thought, it's gone definitely in the favor of Oregon. I have more confidence towards Oregon and less confidence towards Penn State. So my view on this has shifted a lot because the offense for Penn State, the group that they retain, the offensive coordinator, the quarterback, 2 running backs, an offensive line that has 5 players with starting experience. You have a pretty deep tight end room. You upgrade all 3 pass catcher spots for the wide receivers, and the offense looks worse. They took a step back. And it's because this is magnified by the competition they're playing. It'd be different, okay, if they had, a couple non-conference opponents, or maybe they decided to play, a Big Ten game earlier, right? Okay, Oregon's gone up against Northwestern. Oregon's gone up against Oklahoma State. And I know those aren't exactly juggernauts, but both of those teams are better than Villanova, FIU. Well, Oklahoma State, actually. I don't know how good they are. To be honest with you, I think maybe
wasn't great.
Maybe FIU might give them a run for their money. However, Penn State's offense just looks sloppy, and you would think that they would have picked it up against an FCS team, and those same problems lingered and seemed a little more magnified in that follow-up game. So it's kind of, if you want to give it the benefit of the doubt and say that Penn State is trying to save some things, they're really holding back, they're keeping everything as close as possible so that they don't reveal anything to Oregon, so be it. But that's the only thing. That's the only hypothetical. There is no tangible evidence to say that Penn State is trending in the right direction. Oregon is.
I'm interested to hear you say that because I agree that Penn State hasn't always looked as sharp as we were perhaps expecting. I do think back to 2021 for Oregon because that year they came out at home and they played Fresno State, coached by then head coach Kalen DeBoer. And they almost lost the game. Even though Kayvon Thibodeau started the game, didn't finish it, got hurt. Justin Flo had a big game. Anyway, some throwback names for Duck fans in there. And Kayvon Thibodeau was amazing on Sunday in the NFL because he's, of course, really good. Who could have foreseen? Anyway, so I think that in that game, you saw an Oregon team be very bland, vanilla. Maybe they had that look-ahead factor. Mm-hmm. Do you think that that is the most optimistic view you could have? Because then Oregon went to Ohio State and all of a sudden put up 35 points on the road in Columbus. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden they went toe-to-toe with a national title contender that year, and they won the game as a 2-touchdown underdog. And it did kind of seem and feel like, yeah, mentally and playbook wise, they were just kind of waiting to save some stuff for that Ohio State game. How likely do you think it is that Penn State is doing that for this Duck game, given that, those three teams are never going to beat Penn State, especially when they're playing them in Happy Valley?
That's the only thing that I think most Penn State fans and then kind of collectively as media members look at this, is that they have to be holding back something. That's just it, whether it is emotionally, spiritually, right? I'm not sure, but I don't think the energy was there for definitely FIU and Villanova. They just looked flat. They looked basic. I think Andy Kotelnicki's plays, they're complex, but it was still very basic stuff. And again, you don't need that against Villanova. You don't need that against FIU, Nevada. You just don't need it for this non-conference slate. So when you're going into, you have 2 weeks to prepare for Oregon, which benefits Penn State a ton. You have 14 days in total, right? As with where we are. Going into that Oregon game, Oregon at least has to focus on an Oregon State. And then they have 7 days to focus on Penn State. It's a cross-country trip. So if there's anything, that's the only thing that Penn State really has going for them offensively is the element of surprise. And you do have the Jim Knowles factor. Jim Knowles had figured out this Oregon team to an extent when they got to the postseason. Different circumstances the first time they met, but that second time around, yeah, they figured them out.
They certainly did. And giving Jim Knowles that much time, it'll be 10 days by the time this airs on Wednesday, but the extra time for Penn State, the rest versus rust discussion came up last year with Oregon in the Rose Bowl. I think that was a part of it because it was so much time off, but typically good coaches are really good off of a 1 week bye. And so Penn State, unless there's a major injury that I missed, is not dinged up. So they're going to be healthy, and they do have to get ready to roll, because from the Oregon perspective in this game, I've had it tagged as a loss all offseason coming into this year. It's hard to not feel better about Oregon through the first 3 games on both sides of the ball. And we'll see what they do against Oregon State, where they're just a gargantuan favorite once again.
Yes.
But when you watch Dante Moore in particular, we'll talk about the quarterbacks more in the next segment, I think is probably my number one reason why I feel better about Oregon in this spot, because that was a legit question coming into the season. Hey, how is he going to look? And boy, from the moment this season's gotten going, he's thrown 1 interception so far, and that's because he was throwing into the wind right off of Lake Michigan against Northwestern. Like the ball was just dying. And so he's the biggest reason, but the rest of the team has also done a lot of really good things. Oregon's offensive line has been really good. I think the defensive line has been mostly as good as I thought. The secondary is playing really well at the moment, but it is hard for me to not look at Oregon. It's hard for me to not look at Oregon and say, yeah, they're definitely further ahead than where I thought. Like they had some moments. They had not always great against Northwestern. It felt like Northwestern was running the ball
that
a lot.
It was a 9 a.m. game, though.
Yes. It was a 9 a.m. game. Yeah. And once they got it going in the second half, wasn't really it wasn't ever a threat. The problems, quote unquote, that I think some Oregon fans have with, what we saw against Northwestern, it's really nitpicky. It's not that doesn't need to be cleaned up, but when we get back, we're going to talk about the quarterbacks, the running game as well, because that's the number one thing that I talked about earlier this week on my show. Can Penn State take advantage of that again, as they did in the Big Ten championship game? That and why Game Day should be there coming up next.
And this episode is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIH Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else. From footwork to breath work, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings the same intention to how we craft every model. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but. From smooth handling to intuitive controls. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. And this episode is brought to you by DoorDash. It's almost the weekend, time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. For Penn State, I'm going to go with Tony Rojas, and honestly Amari Campbell as well. They delivered in a big way. Both linebackers were flying around the football field against Villanova. They were also leading the team in tackles. Tony Rojas had 2 sacks in that game. Amari Campbell also had tackles for loss as well, 3 of them. So these guys were making an impact for Penn State right out of the gate in this game against Villanova. So no hesitation, no delay. When the pressure was on, they delivered. And if you've been watching week after week, you know these performances were not a fluke. And just like Tony Rojas and Amari Campbell delivered for Penn State, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you can save every Saturday you order, stack it up all season long, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through November 18th.
Let's talk about the running game, Seyko. So Oregon against Northwestern in the first half allowed more first downs than you would like. Didn't actually allow a point because they picked off Preston Stone. The passing game was not there at all for Northwestern, and that was about what you expected. But for about a quarter, I'd say, Northwestern was kind of leaning on Oregon on the ground and was moving the ball up and down the field. Now, you go back to the Big Ten championship game, I believe Penn State went for 900 yards rushing in that game. Yeah, something like that. It was at will. So through 3 games, is this Penn State run game as good as you have wanted it to be?
It's not as good as I have wanted it to be, but they're adding different wrinkles. So the tangible results, it's really mostly just specific to Nicholas Singleton. Number 10 for Oregon fans that are watching this that don't, he's the speedster of the duo between him and Kaytron Allen. Singleton's the Lightning, Kaytron Allen's the Thunder. Kaytron Allen's looked like a much better new version of himself. He looks like the A running back, the 1A to the 1B. I think those guys on any given day, on any given game of football, can be the lead, can be the understudy, if you will. They're both really good. They're just really good at different things. But right now, with what Penn State needs, they're not really hitting the home runs, and that's Singleton's specialty. They're hitting a lot of singles and a lot of doubles, and it's been Kaytron Allen that's hit the home run here and there in these first 3 games. So lean on him, use Singleton in the passing game, which is what I'm expecting. So yes, Penn State is going to, they are reserving some things for Oregon, definitely. You want to show some things, but not everything. And I think with the running backs, that's going to be key because Penn State's ground game is still efficient. They've added some new wrinkles with misdirection, some jet sweeps with the wide receivers, which I really like. I still think Penn State running up the middle inside zone, now that Oregon has replaced, I know there's still talent there, and I know this defensive line is deep, but if you're going to attack Oregon on the ground to the outside or the inside, you want to go inside.
So the running game in that Big Ten championship went for 297 yards for Penn State in that one, which was not good, and it was not a good day for Oregon's defense. Against Northwestern, where some fans had some gripes because of the first half, the total numbers look way worse than it actually was. Northwestern ended the game with 178 rushing yards. 79 of those came when Oregon had their second or third stringers on the field at the end on one particular carry. So outside of that, which is not who's going to see the field, because I don't think Oregon's going to Happy Valley and blowing them out, or else we're going to sound the alarm bells because Oregon is right back to being the number 1 team in the country pretty much, if that were to be the case. But they gave up basically 100 yards rushing to Northwestern, and I did a segment earlier this week. Is that a problem? Is that a concern? Because there was a stretch. And my answer is not majorly. I don't think that it's as good as you would like it to be, necessarily. And I think you have to be better against the Penn State. But I can't look at it and go, oh, this is just such a huge concern because for a 9 a.m. Pacific time kickoff, you had, and look, this is going to be a long trip, and long trips can wear on you. And that's one of the reasons that Penn State is favored and why I've said this is going to be such a challenging game. But overall, I'm like lukewarm, I'll say. That's how I feel about Oregon's run defense, because in the other games, when they were at home, dominant. We'll see how they are against Oregon State, who wants to run the ball but hasn't had a lot of success. If that pops up this week, if Oregon State has several drives where they are just leaning on Oregon's defensive line and running up and down the field, okay, then I'll start to get concerned. But right now, I'm not anywhere near pressing the panic button on, oh my gosh, Oregon has a run defense problem. But I want to flip and talk about the quarterbacks as well, because Dante Moore has looked so good. I mean, he is making incredible throws, not big numbers against Northwestern. The game flow just didn't really call for it. No. And he was out of the game before the fourth quarter, really. So I think that for Dante Moore in this game and Drew Allar, through the first 3 games, hard to not be more impressed with Dante Moore's overall play.
Oh, yeah, is that right? No, that's absolutely the case, because Dante Moore looks like he's in control, more consistency, not really the second guessing, the overthinking. I do think the matchups kind of call for that to an extent, like you said, even specific to Northwestern, that, oh, they kept him out of the game. The game script didn't demand it. Kind of the thing going for Penn State is the game script doesn't demand a lot from Penn State either to win these games decisively the way they did. It just didn't look pretty. But again, against inferior competition, that's the case. So Drew Allar against Nevada, 22 of 26, right around 200 yards, no turnovers. That's kind of what you're expecting, is just a clean game of football. Okay? And even if he had, let's take Julian Sayin, for example, fresh off of this game against Ohio, and I think Ohio's a pretty competitive MAC team. They should maybe win the conference. He had 300 plus yards. He was 25 of 32, couple interceptions, but look at the way he was throwing the football around. Again, the only thing that you can say about Penn State, Drew Allar in this, the pass catching, is that they are reserving things, because Allar's missing some open reads. He's going to the obvious check down. It doesn't seem like plays are really developing. It's just kind of a one read. If my one read's not there, I go to the check down. It's not, so is he intentionally not going through his progressions? I'm not entirely sure.
Have the wide receivers been as good as you'd hope so far?
In game 1, Kyron Hudson, Trevor Pena, they were playmakers. Against FIU, they were not really present. And then in this upcoming game, again, this is where Drew Allar against Villanova, an FCS opponent, it just wasn't put together. It was very discombobulated. It was very clustered. So there were moments where, Trevor Pena makes that play, or Trevor Pena's running wide open. It was just too many few and far plays in between, where there's just the consistent theme, even included against Nevada here, is there were just points left on the football field. There were explosive plays left on the football field by the offense. The key to winning this game against Oregon for Penn State is to run the football, to go power O, to utilize not 1 but 2 star running backs. I don't care that Singleton's has a cold start. This game can be won by those running backs and this offensive line, and then have the passing game complement it. I still don't think, to an extent, that Drew Allar and the wide receivers are totally on the same page. Okay, Kyron Hudson, Devontae Ross, they showed up in the winter, but Trevor Pena showed up after May. Okay, that's not a lot of time to build this elite rapport with one another. Devontae Ross was also dealing with some bumps and bruises through training camp, so did that limit what they were doing, what kind of work they were doing? There are better days ahead for Penn State's passing attack, but that's still not good when you face an elite opponent like Oregon.
Okay. That's an interesting thing to follow. And in these Big Ten matchups, I didn't mean to, in these marquee Big Ten matchups, would be a better way to phrase it.
Sure.
Whoever wins a rushing battle, usually winds up winning the game. Oregon barely outgained Ohio State on the ground last year at Austin Stadium. Got outgained pretty hilariously in the Rose Bowl and lost that particular game. And speaking of the marquee, Seyko, this should be College GameDay.
It should.
It's a bye for Georgia and Alabama this week, and I know Georgia just had a big win at Tennessee, But man, you're going to have the two higher ranked teams in this spot because Oregon is not going to lose to Oregon State. And you're going to have a top, I think, 5 matchup minimum. I didn't double check what the AP poll is before we started recording. Oregon's at number 6. And Penn State is sitting there at number 2. With Alabama's loss to Florida State, I'd be pretty upset. Not just for the game itself. I'd be upset for Penn State fans if this is not the game day game.
We talked about this a lot earlier that, hey, if we speculate, game day should do this. But will they? Again, it's the separation of powers now. ESPN, who has College GameDay, ESPN has all the rights to the SEC and the ACC and parts of the Big 12, right? I'm not going to go through every contractual agreement. But then Fox and NBC and CBS, that's the Big 10. So I know that Game Day likes Penn State, but that was before there was this true clear, the SEC is here and the Big 10 is here.
Yep.
And the panels are obviously a lot different now. You've rotated the on-air talent and everything. So ESPN looks a lot different than it did with all the other times that it came back for Penn State and Michigan or Penn State and Ohio State and things like that. This is a unique matchup, okay? Alabama losing to Florida State the way they did adds a little bit of room in there for Penn State and Oregon to have a stronger case because you have to do extra convincing to say to ESPN. I don't even think
it's a little room. I just think from a neutral standpoint, it should be seen as the game of the week in college football for next week. I don't think there is a bigger one. I really don't.
If you want to make the case for LSU and Ole Miss as well,
no shot. Just throwing
it out there. Throwing it out there.
No, valid to throw it out there. I know you weren't trying to argue that. Just. Yeah. I reject the notion that Ole Miss should be seen as a more exciting team to watch right now. Like, absolutely not.
It's a top 5. I'll leave it at this. It's a top 5 matchup. Alabama is not, at least perceived right now, as that true playoff contender or title contender that maybe they once were, and we're only a few weeks into the season, right? But you know for a fact that Penn State and Oregon, again, it's a marquee matchup. It's a unique matchup. This game does not happen. Georgia-Alabama happens.
Yeah.
What, almost every year? Sometimes twice?
It should happen every year. It actually doesn't, but it should. It happens several times, over the course of a 5-year span, though. Like, I agree. I like the angle you take on that with the uniqueness of the matchup. And I've got a hypothetical to throw at you, and then we might do a little bit of matchup talk as well. More on this crossover edition of Locked On Ducks and Locked On Nittany Lions.
And this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all of your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without even touching a spreadsheet. You can maximize your investments, increase your savings rate, easily review finances with your partner or a financial advisor, and keep a clear view of your financial health week to week or even long term. Don't let the financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That is right, 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONCollege.
All right, I got this question from one of my listeners out there, Seyko. What score would it take in Happy Valley for the Penn State fans to feel like they got their bell rung by a superior team? I'll let you answer that.
Okay, so we're saying that where Oregon has the decisive dominant victory?
Yeah, like what's the minimum amount of a point differential needed for Penn State fans to feel like, hey, Oregon just came in here and was absolutely the better team? Because it's different from my perspective looking at this game, because even though I like Oregon's chances to win more after how they've performed so far in the season, than I felt in the offseason about it. I definitely can still feel good about Oregon, even if they don't win the game. Like, if they go toe-to-toe with Penn State and the Nittany Lions scrape by on a game-winning, 50-yard field goal or whatever, I'm not going to sit here and go, oh, this is a disaster, Oregon's terrible. I'll say, no, look at what Oregon just did. That'd be really impressive. But if Oregon were to win, I'll let you go back and answer that question.
So I've kind of said this on some other shows, just recently, just looking around college football. Sometimes it's not about not only that you win or you lose. Again, it's how you win, how you lose. So if Oregon happens to win by double digits or 2 touchdowns, that's kind of where I draw the line, is that if this goes beyond by a 1-score game, but it's also the decisiveness of it. If Oregon happens to, it's a tie game going into the 4th, and Oregon takes the lead, and then Penn State has to go for it in their own territory, and then Oregon capitalizes on that. You know that this was a tied game, and then Oregon was able to kind of backdoor its way into a double-digit lead potentially. Same thing goes for Penn State. You can look at that and say, okay, that's just kind of the outcome. That's the box score, but it doesn't tell the full story. If it's decisive, Oregon's running the football. They're just trying to walk their way out of Beaver Stadium. It's those kinds of close-it-out games that are so, I just think, annoying, exhausting for Penn State, because it's happened against Ohio State. It's happening against Michigan, at least over the past couple of seasons, where they're just able to literally run it at Penn State and run down the clock step by step by step. So if Oregon does that, that's where it's like, okay, here we go again, 10-2. Penn State's still that tier 2 team. So it's really anything that is decisive, that is firmly decisive, and that is probably over that 1-score threshold. If Oregon were to win 28-21 or something like that, it's like, okay, Penn State's there, but man, it's all or nothing on Ohio State now. There's really no wiggle room for anything else at that point. You would have to win against Ohio State, obviously.
Among the advantages that I can list for Penn State in this game, being at home, being off a bye, more experienced roster, and all that sort of stuff, one that I think has to come into mind here is that if this is a close game, which it should be, I'm pretty sure the line's still at Penn State minus 6.5. But if this is a close game, this will be the first time that this group of Oregon players has been in a close game, have to execute in certain key spots, and 1 or 2 plays can make or break the game. And Penn State, for better or worse, has been in those particular spots because it's Drew Allar, a lot of the same offensive line, the receivers are new, the running backs, the defense, there are guys that have been in that position. But if you're playing a tight game, Dante Moore doesn't know what it's like to play a tight game in the 4th quarter with Oregon now. And the execution for Oregon across the board offensively, whether you're talking, they had no penalties last week against Northwestern. First time that Oregon's done that since 2000. From the moment this season began, everything has looked buttoned up, well-oiled machine, all of that sort of stuff. It's different when you've got 100,000 people screaming on top of you and you're playing to, put yourself right into the national championship conversation late in the 4th quarter. It's 28-24, 2:40 on the clock. You got to go down and score. Yeah. I think that's something else that pops in my head of hey, I think that favors Penn State on paper and just adds to the fact that if Oregon is able to pull it out and win, it'll speak to how well prepared Dan Lanning and this staff have got this pretty young but really talented Oregon team.
Yeah, and Dante Moore, I know Oregon fans aren't doing this, but this is more for Penn State fans or anybody else that's kind of neutral in this conversation, is that Dante Moore, don't view him as a first-year starter. This is a third-year veteran in college football that is a former 5-star quarterback, and he's been through it. Okay, the disaster that the exit of Chip Kelly was, Dante Moore was there and went through that adversity. And then he goes in and just kind of quietly bides his time, settles in at Oregon, learns behind Dylan Gabriel, and then adjusts to Will Stein's system. So but there should have been more credence for Moore going into this season with the Ducks because this wasn't a transfer quarterback. It's not like he wasn't practicing with the receivers last season or this year before. He was getting all of the reps. He's not brand new, and he's not brand new to the sport either. So Dante Moore's a first-year starting quarterback. He had starting experience at UCLA, but truly a first year, no competition. This is your offense, that kind of thing. Yeah, and that's why I think we've seen Dante Moore so settled in, but it's also just kind of the maturity of him as a quarterback is just like he is a former 5-star. He's not going to be flustered and rattled by a lot of things, but the true whiteout environment, I mean, that is to a different level, so I'm eager to see. There's going to be that balance to it. I don't think Moore's going to be overwhelmed, but he's also not going to have, it's not going to be just like a snowball effect where everything's downhill and Oregon's not going to sputter at points and times. It's not going to be easy because of Jim Knowles' defense, but also the environment that Penn State has.
Yeah, I mean, the environment will be a part of it. I don't think Dante being a 5-star necessarily relates to his mental toughness. You know, I mean, look at what Arch Manning looks like right now. He literally looks bad. Just straight up. He cannot make routine, simple throws. His decision-making is bad, all that sort of stuff. And some of that does come back to the coaching staff and putting him. But it also at some point comes down to the kid. You can have as good a coaching staff as you want. Some guys just don't have it. And Dante, I don't think is in the negative in that regard because he has looked poised. He has looked composed. And he hasn't faced anything like Penn State yet. So it'll be a really, really awesome test for him to go and see how he can compete in that environment against the best defensive coordinator he's ever faced, the best defense that he has ever faced, even going back to his time at UCLA. He went at Utah as a true freshman, and that didn't go very well. But I take this Penn State defense, even though that Utah one was certainly really good. It's the toughest environment, and it's going to be the biggest game as well. Like everything is, here is your premier test for Oregon, for the coaching staff and how they've gotten this team prepared. For Dante Moore, it is the premier test. And I think Jim Knowles against Dante Moore, when you look at what he did to Dylan Gabriel in the offense in the Rose Bowl, that's going to be one of the biggest matchups in this game. And I can't wait for it. I'm so unbelievably stoked. I wish the Civil War was going to be more competitive against Oregon State. It's just not, because Oregon State is probably going to fire Trent Bray here at some point this season, unless he can really turn it around. But this game has been, we've talked about it so much. I think I've talked about this game more this offseason than I even did the Ohio State game last year, which, by the way, lived up to the billing and is the best win of Dan Lanning's coaching career. This one would be up there. This one would be up there as like in that regard for Oregon, because of all the factors that stack against them and that stack in Penn State's favor. But Nittany Lions are favored for a reason. You can always check out FanDuel if you feel like you know how the game is playing out. Zach Seyko, Locked On Nittany Lions. Always great to talk to you, my man. I'm Spencer McLaughlin, Locked On Ducks. Appreciate everyone listening. We will see you next time. And until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.